On this episode of That Was a Show...
This is post Cheech and Chong.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think it's post Born in East LA. But
he gets a prestigious and Cheech Marin credit.
yeah.
This kitchen makes no sense, though.
This kitchen is a redress set from something else.
Yeah. This was a living room set. There's so much floor space and like one stove in a commercial kitchen. It makes no sense.
I love the look of that hotel, too. All the pink and the rattan, it's like my shit. I love it so much.
I'm starting a slut count, by the way. I'm counting the amount of slut jokes they do.
Yeah.
It's 3.
It's actually 4.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cold open. We grew up during peak sitcom, Seinfeld, Friends, The Fresh Prince, but those shows were diamonds in the rough. This podcast is not about those diamonds. It's about the rough. Some sitcoms were briefly popular in their time. Some were canceled almost immediately. You probably won't recognize most of these, and you'll say, that was a show?
That was a show?
The podcast about failed or forgotten sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, starring
Brynn Byrne,
Aaron Yeger,
And Andrew Helmer as Barry.
a Radio Gizmo production.
Hello and welcome to That Was a Show. Following in the footsteps of Joni Loves Chachi, we're going to be talking about another failed spin-off. So, we're throwing a party and inviting everyone we know. Or actually, just one person we know, because this is our first episode with a guest. Our friend Samantha MacAdam is joining us to talk about her show pick, the spin-off of The Golden Girls, The Golden Palace. And yes, I will be making a lot of references to the Golden Girls theme song and getting a lot of scorn from my co-hosts. Sam is a writer and director. We first met when we worked together on the comedy short Prom Night, which stars Jerry D., Marty Adams, and Frank Spadone, and was a top 5 short film finalist at the 2017 Just for Laughs Festival. It was also then selected for Kevin Hart's Laugh Out Loud network. Sam is now developing a feature film based on the same story. Hi, Sam. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be the first guest.
Yeah, and it's so great to have another woman in the room. Well, not in the room, but, over Zoom.
A little bit awkward, but it's good. It's good to see people, too, other than just my immediate family.
It's nice to see somebody put into the Zoom co-host position, as I've been in the past.
Brynn, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the Golden Palace?
The Golden Palace was the unsuccessful spin-off of the well-loved and wildly successful Golden Girls. It was created by Susan Harris, who also created the Golden Girls. It aired for one season on CBS with a total of 24 episodes before being canceled. The cast includes 3 of the 4 original Golden Girls, Estelle Getty, Rue McClanahan, and Betty White. Also added to the cast are Don Cheadle, Cheech Marin, and Billy L. Sullivan. The Golden Palace follows 3 of the original girls, Blanche, Sophia, and Rose, as they sell their shared house in Miami to buy a hotel that they plan to operate themselves. We watched the pilot episode and episodes 7 and 8 to prepare for this discussion.
And episodes 7 and 8 is the 2-parter.
That's
where
right.
Dorothy makes an appearance.
Because of course.
Because of course they had to do that.
I really love the concept of them just buying a hotel, because it just sounds like they're in a writer's room and they just had a bag full of ideas of how to continue the show. And like, it was just hotel with a question mark had to be the entire pitch.
All right, let's travel down the road and back again.
Ugh.
Sam, why did you choose this show?
Well, because it was so batshit, the concept, to me, to be honest. No, I love Golden Girls, and when I heard about it, I did remember it from childhood. Like, I was very sick, and I, honest to God, true story, I don't know if it was like a fever dream, but I saw it on TV one day, and when we were talking about spin-offs, I was like thinking of the sitcoms that I loved from the 80s and 90s, and then of course Golden Girls came in my head, and then I just remembered this. very, very vaguely. And I didn't know if it was a real thing. And then when I Googled it and I saw there was Don Cheadle and Cheech involved, I'm like, I have to recommend this. It was between that and honestly, Living Dolls was the other one, which had it was a Who's the Boss spinoff, and I also loved Who's the Boss, and it had Leah Remini and Halle Berry, which was
okay. So we're going to be investigating that
Yes.
show later.
Yes.
See that's how that's often how we pick shows too. Is like it's
You go down a
interesting
rabbit
concept,
hole.
and then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this actor that shouldn't be in there is there. Okay.
Yeah, it was too random. My husband passed by and he's like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, "It's the Golden Girls plus Don Cheadle and Cheech from Cheech and Chong and a random kid." Like, it's so weird.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you made me watch this.
Yeah.
I knew it was a Golden Girls spinoff, but until I started watching it, because I didn't bother looking up anything, I assumed that it would just be one of the Golden Girls. No way is this 3 out of 4. I was like,
Yeah.
it's probably just Betty White or worse, Rue McClanahan. And like, it's just one of them doing something and they just wanted to work. I didn't think it was just like, well, Bea Arthur left, so let's change the title.
Well, and Bea Arthur was basically like the straight person in the comedy
You need
group.
her.
Like,
You really need her.
yeah, she's the glue that holds it together. She was the, what did you call her? The voice of reason.
The voice of reason, the anchor.
Yeah, and who I mostly related with, like even as a small child, I was like a grumpy old conservative white woman, and I'm ethnic, so that's interesting. But no, she was probably my favorite. And yeah, and even like previously we were watching this, and I was doing the slut count, which was 10, by the way. You need her to kind of reel back in Sophia for a lot of moments, and like without it, Sophia just kind of she's great.
She's off the
But
chain.
she kind of just, yeah, exactly. And, it's kind of, sometimes it's hard to watch when she's calling Blanche a slut. Just, kind of cringe. You need Dorothy there to keep her in line.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so, I mean, I was worried about the dynamic of, okay, 3 out of the 4, it's
Yeah.
going to feel like, okay, this
Yeah.
is kind of cobbled together. But as soon as I saw the name Don Cheadle in the opening
Right.
credits,
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that saves it.
And,
I
like-
don't care about the other details. I want to see Don Cheadle.
I was actually I was cleaning while I was watching the pilot, so I had the credits going in the background and I missed it. And then he's like he's in the second scene and I just got so excited.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think I texted you guys and was just like Don Cheadle, like
Yeah.
10 question
A-list
marks.
actor Don Cheadle.
I love Don Cheadle, yeah, too, but it didn't sell me on it, to be honest, though. When I heard it, I thought it was an odd pairing. I'll be honest. Like, I was like, Golden Girls and Don Cheadle?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have pitched that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
and-
you know what?
yeah.
That does work.
He sort of fills a little bit of the straight man
Yeah.
role.
Totally.
He is
Yes.
the voice of reason. He is
Yes.
the,
even more strongly than Dorothy ever was. Like,
I don't know.
I don't know.
But,
But she
when
has the
when Dorothy comes back, you can see how much better Bea Arthur is at reining them
At
in.
reining them in,
Yeah.
yes.
Whereas
For
like
sure.
he doesn't quite have any hold over any of them particularly.
Yeah.
Which is fair.
Yeah,
I
one,
guess
he's their employee.
Exactly.
And,
I guess what
yeah.
I'm thinking is like, yes, she reins them in.
Yeah.
She's the one who can do that. But Don Cheadle's character is definitely positioned as rational.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
he's the person who is not of their zany world. He's
Yeah.
like a normal, rational human being
Yes.
who
Yeah.
walks into situations and interprets them logically. And
right. He's just watching the craziness
Yeah.
unfold.
Yeah.
And he's like, what's up with this kind of thing?
But you're right. Bea Arthur is better at managing the craziness.
Yeah.
But do you,
Or
Yeah.
their specific
Right.
brand of
But
crazy.
he's
But do you think
definitely
it's-
us. He's the surrogate for the audience.
Yeah.
He's the
Oh, for sure.
the rational
Yeah.
person watching this unfold. Barry and I were talking about this a few moments ago. Like,
It's
this
fine.
feels like a perfectly fine extension of Golden Girls.
Yeah,
like,
it's
if
fine.
you're a fan of the Golden Girls, this show is
Mhm.
fine. It's a spin-off and they changed the name, but it does feel like an extension of the same world. It's
Yeah.
not
yeah.
extreme the way that like
It's no, it's
Frasier
nor-
is a spin-off
Yeah.
of Cheers, but they are radically different story worlds. This is really an
Totally.
extension
This is
of
no more drastic than say like a sitcom that wasn't working getting like a mid-season retooling.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
It is.
it's a tweak of the
It's
premise.
true. Like, I don't know why
Yeah.
they didn't just say, oh, we're doing another season without Dorothy. And this is what we're going to throw in here.
because
Like,
it makes me wonder if they could have done like if they would have gotten 2 or 3 out of this if they just hadn't changed the title.
Yeah.
For me, I did not love this series. Like, I love seeing the girls doing their thing, but
Yeah.
and for me, I loved, what was it, 7 and 8, because Dorothy's back, right? And she's just too good, and I find it a lot funnier with her, and it's just a better flow, obviously. But it's such a hard thing because they were together for how many years, and then now they're trying to do it without her, and they all bounce off each other so well, and yeah, so it's a really hard thing to make it successful. And that being said, it still was watchable. Like, I wouldn't say it was horrible, but I much prefer the Golden Girls.
Yeah, and I think you're right too. We're 7 and 8. They work a lot better, and it is just because you're like, right, because it just becomes Golden Girls again.
Yeah.
And I love that they explain it too, because they explain what happened to Dorothy. Because also too, a little bit in the back of my mind, I'm like, they went and did this big venture, and there's no real mention of Dorothy, like, because they do everything together. And there was no phone call, there was no nothing. You thought there'd be a little something in the pilot, but when she came, they wrapped it up really nicely, where they were like, in a comedic way too, like, we didn't want to bother you because you just got married, and she's like, well, I felt my feelings were hurt, and like, they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, agreed. And like, usually in a spin-off like this, you would have seen this in the pilot in most other spin-offs.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas like, like just something like Buffy or Angel, like you'd have like Angel call Buffy or that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like, it was interesting because I mean, I think they wanted to give it a little time to breathe on its own without her.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think that something else that I found kind of funny about episodes 7 and 8, where there's all these lines and all this language about Dorothy doubting that they could do this. Were they talking about the hotel, or were they talking about Bea Arthur, like, doubting whether they could carry that show without her?
Such a good point.
Was it a meta commentary there?
I think I mean,
because it was
it's written by sitcom writers. There's no way there wasn't some meta commentary.
That is such a good point.
Because it's 7 or 8 episodes in.
Yeah.
And maybe they were already seeing signs of trouble that people weren't watching it.
Yeah, maybe.
And they were like, "Oh, we gotta bring in Dorothy. We gotta do something quick.
Yeah, like
because
maybe
this is going down, and we gotta comment on it."
I can just see Bea Arthur with his Sharpie, like with the pen just off on the side, just being like, "Nope, not this, not this."
Yeah, and also that moment, that we were talking about, the fact that they wrap it up nicely with Bea Arthur at the end of that episode. Not only is it good from like a storytelling perspective, I think it's very true to like female friendships as well.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's always these moments where you're trying to please the other person, and then you're sort of afraid to like upset them, so you hold back, and then you all end up crying, and then you're like, oh, like, I love you, no, I love you, it's gonna be okay. And so I think it was very cute and very true to life, just like everything in the original Golden Girls.
It's true. Yeah. And that's what I liked about it too, is that they check each other, right? And I do that very much with my friends, probably more than I should, but they're very honest, and they check each other, and all the I guess slut shaming, would it be called? I don't know. When I watch it doesn't bother me because I know the time that they were in, and also that it's coming from a good place in a weird way, or a lighthearted place.
Well, in the Golden Girls, the whole thing of positioning Blanche as this really promiscuous character, it seemed at that time, and I don't know, I didn't go back and watch a Golden Girls to see if it holds up.
It was cutting edge, man. That was...
It felt like at that time, part of it was this statement of she's this older woman, and she's having these sexual relationships out in the open, and it's kind of a counterbalance to the Hollywood thing of like women over a certain age would not get to be positioned as a sexual character. So there was an element of like the slut shaming was probably there, but there also seemed to be an element of like, I don't know if progressive is the word, but an element of like, look what we're doing with these older characters. That seemed like an interesting statement at the time. But in this show, it feels like less of that and more of just like making fun of it.
But at this point,
because there's no Dorothy.
It's so built into their relationships that like you could write these jokes with the sound off, because if you've seen 4 or 5 episodes of Golden Girls, you know the joke. And this is definitely one of the weaknesses of the Golden Girls, so therefore Golden Palace. Like each of the 4 main ones has a joke about them, and you can tell that if somebody's making a joke about them, it is Rose is ditzy, and
naive.
Mhm.
Dorothy is
Tough.
brusque and like tough and tall. Blanche is obviously promiscuous. Estelle Getty is old and Italian. These are the jokes about them, and it's like, how do you cut that faucet off after 7 or 8 years?
Well, then the other thing is that this show very much can't stand on its own. Like when you start watching this show, these characters, if you do find them funny and charming, it's because you know them from years of Golden Girls. Like there's no time spent getting to know why they're behaving the way they are. It just dives right into the deep end on you already know these characters, you already know all their personality traits and dynamics, and it's just picking up where they left off from the Golden Girls without missing a beat. There's no like reestablishing anything.
No real setup. I feel like Golden Girls, in a lot of ways, it was empowering women. And for me, it was like, as a child, I was like, oh, what do old people do when they're retired? Like, this is what they do. Like, I was like, oh, lots of sex and stuff. Okay. Like, but honestly, as a child, I was generally interested to see what happens when you retired. And it was like, in a weird way, it was like a relief to see, oh, you still have a life and you could still be doing things and it's not like over.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think in a weird way, it was like very empowering, this show too. And also like the other thought I had too, that, speaking to the characters, is I was watching a few episodes and it's, it's crazy to me because it all is really just in their apartment, right? I guess they did have kitchen scenes too.
So they always had a kitchen scene.
There's three main sets that I could tell in Golden Palace. There was the lobby, there was the dining room, and then there was the kitchen.
The kitchen set, which they use a lot, makes no sense. It looks like some sort of open concept, half kitchen, half living room from like a Florida condo. It does not look like a commercial kitchen. There's like one stove and maybe 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And the way it's decorated, the spaciousness, the cleanliness, it doesn't look even remotely like what a commercial kitchen would look like. I get that in sitcoms, the proportions of rooms are going to be different than real life, but even just on a decorating level, it feels like a lost opportunity.
Yeah, it's a
totally.
to do something interesting.
It's a lazy set. The show jumps through so many hoops to make it clear that it's just them running this hotel. And it's like, why? You couldn't hire an extra to bus tables? Like, you really want me to believe that Sophia is cooking every meal, doing all the prep, bussing, and is she waiting too?
Well, and there's the sitcom logic of, yes, they make the comment in dialogue, well, there's no money, we can't afford to hire more staff. But at the same time,
like,
you bought the hotel, you bought the building.
Yeah, you had some cash laying around.
It's a 42-room hotel. I mean, the electricity bill would cost more than hiring a couple staff members.
These are operating costs. Like, you're going to lose the money if you do not hire the staff.
Yeah, you get a line of credit from the bank and you pay those operating costs, because if you don't run this properly, you're going to lose everything. Like, it makes no sense.
These are all, and none of this would bother me if the show didn't try to explain it to me. We keep having these things come up on the shows that we cover where I'm like, this wouldn't be an issue if you weren't bringing it up.
Right.
Like on Muddling Through, when we talked about the ages forever, you're like, I wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't have made such a GD point of bringing up their ages.
Yeah,
so
like,
much.
why bring up details that you're not going to logically construct?
I wouldn't
Just
have questioned it if you had people in the background bussing tables.
Jumping back into the way the plot unfolds in the pilot, Don Cheadle's character, who's the manager of the hotel, is also a foster father of an adolescent son who appears out of nowhere in the first episode, and we don't see him in episodes 7 and 8.
Yeah, I read about that. It's kind of a trope we've established. Well, we haven't established it here on That Was a Show, but it is like a thing that haunts me all the time, which is disappearing children in sitcoms. The biggest, most obnoxious example of that is Family Matters. Judy Winslow.
Totally.
There's a middle daughter, Judy Winslow, that inexplicably disappears. And I don't know how many seasons she makes it, but it's basically like she goes up the stairs and then like never comes back down. And this is what happens in the Golden Palace. They do explain it.
Thank God.
Do they?
So basically what it is his mom that he references in that first episode, she comes back for him, and his mom is played by Joely Fisher, which is kind of fun. So his mom comes back for him and like which is like
that
troubling.
makes me feel better, I guess.
No,
But,
because
but
she's
also,
horrible.
yeah, but
Yeah.
also like, well, Don Cheadle was raising him just fine.
Yeah, exactly. But his name is Oliver. Like how
I noticed that.
Oh, his name's
Oh my
Oliver.
gosh.
Little Orphan Oliver.
Orphan
Yeah.
Oliver? Oh,
like,
come
it's
on.
very on the nose.
I was like, well, they could have written him out by just having him not be there. He doesn't have to be in the plots. Like maybe he stops working there because he doesn't have to be working there. But
yeah, because he's a kid.
he's
for
a
God's
child.
sake.
He's a
Yeah.
child.
This hotel has child labor, has elderly labor.
I think the writers were just setting us up for the twist series finale, where Sophia dies of a heart attack from exhaustion. I think that's what all of this was.
I was kind of worried about it too. I was just like, she's working so. Not only is she working hard, she's working way harder than they are.
It's true.
Like-
She's
Exactly.
busting her ass.
And meanwhile, Blanche is what? Just answering phones? And she's the
Yeah,
youngest
I think
one?
so.
And not very well either.
No.
Yeah.
No.
No, that's why it didn't work. It just felt like they should be resting. And also, too, like, I love seeing them in the relaxed state. I like when they came out with their robe on and had beauty masks on, and you lose all of that because they're at work,
Mhm.
right? So, yeah, I just feel bad for them mainly watching.
There are definitely times where you're like, you're feeling bad for them. And you're like, I don't think that's the intention here.
Yeah.
When we think about it, Golden Girls, the whole thing was about them being retired.
Mhm.
And now they are no longer retired.
Yeah.
They're like fully back at work. So, yeah, I guess a lot of everything kind of changes in that respect. Like,
Yeah.
when you think about the original pitch, you have women that are retired and all the stuff that goes on. And then you have senior citizens now running a hotel. Like, it's very different. in that
Yeah,
respect,
for
you
sure.
know?
And then, episode 7 and 8, which is where Bea Arthur comes back and just to visit them. But the primary plot of the episode actually becomes about thinking that her mother is too old to be working in this place. And then it just
Valid.
becomes too real because
Yeah.
you're just like, I know we're supposed to be rooting for her to stay with them, but like,
Go.
I hope
Go to
that,
Shady Pines.
I hope
There's
that.
circuses and massages.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems
I want
way
to go
nicer.
live there.
I would love to go live there.
It calls out that hole in the concept in a way that where it suddenly stops being a sitcom and starts being a drama.
Yeah.
Like the plot of
Yeah.
7 and 8 is a very rational tension between
Yeah.
like the commentary that is interesting. Like these women want to have purpose and want to have something to fill their time, and they get something emotionally out of getting to run this thing, but
Sure.
rationally, at least in Sophia's case,
Mhm.
it doesn't really
Yeah.
make sense
It
that they
doesn't
would be
make
taking
sense.
this on.
Yeah.
What
Yeah, and, like-
Dorothy brings to the table in that two-parter
Yeah.
Yeah.
prompts an interesting
and
theme.
It's an interesting thing from a writing standpoint, where it's like you bring back Bea Arthur and almost instantly she's not antagonistic, but she is the antagonist in the plot, as in
Yeah.
she's
Right.
the one that they are against.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting
She's
way to,
questioning everything.
that's a really interesting plot. And like it does lead to a very, very sweet, very well acted scene from Estelle Getty where she admits that as much as she was enjoying the retirement home, the new retirement home, not her old retirement home, as much as she was enjoying it, it made her feel old. And how like when she was with the girls and working, it made her feel young and like she had a purpose. And it's a very sweet scene. It definitely gives you another year of Estelle Getty on this show. But what if this show was successful and it was on for 5 or 6 years? How uncomfortable is this going to be seeing? I mean, Estelle Getty's a lot younger than her character, but she states she's 88 in the pilot.
I think
So,
they correct it to like 87. She thinks she's 88,
87,
and one of the
she's
others
87.
corrects
So
her.
like we're 6 seasons
my
down
gosh.
the line, and
No.
she's in her mid 90s. Like
No.
we're not, we're not gonna. It's not gonna be cute anymore.
Yeah.
She would
Yeah.
be making just desserts or something, not even, like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
or having coffee always in the dining room, I think.
If the hotel had a bar, and
Yes.
and Sophia was just hanging out at the bar all the time.
if she was just
Yeah.
norming,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
No, or she was like the bartender, like she had like a bar back running around doing all the heavy lifting and all that stuff, but she just like made drinks casually and
Yum.
listened to people's problems.
actually, that'd be really funny. Like her
Wouldn't
just
it be
making
cute?
little
And
quick,
she'd have to-
snarky quips at people.
Yeah,
And
and because she's so petite, she'd have to stand on some apple boxes in order to like.
that's a good visual.
Cute,
too.
eh?
I would do something like she can't see quite right and she's putting wrong ingredients in.
Right.
or too much
Yeah.
alcohol in or something
Writes
like that.
itself.
Yeah, it does. Or if they did open some sort of business. And the whole plot with her is that Rose and Blanche didn't want her to work so hard and were always having to stop her from taking on too much. Like that would have made a lot more sense. But maybe, I don't know, maybe they do that in the Golden Palace. I have no idea. We didn't watch enough of it to know.
Nobody can verify.
You know, I like the idea of maybe they're like, okay, Sophia, you are a partner in this, but you know, we don't want you to overdo it. We don't want you to work too hard. And then they're always having to stop her. Like they'll catch her running around cleaning up all this stuff and then they have to stop her from doing it. Like that would be a fun little running joke, but I guess
like Sophia busing would be a lot funnier as if she wasn't supposed to be doing it and she keeps doing it anyway. Like that's funny.
And she criticizes how they want to do things and like calls everyone lazy or
I think the busing was just like too far.
It was too far.
Just had her just cooking. Because, you know, when I think about it, like my grandmother, who's 92, she still cooks, you know, like and still wants to cook. She does like to clean too, but like I could kind of stop her with that.
And I guess like when Chewie comes back, he's doing the cooking. So is she now only doing the physical labor?
Busing? Like, I mean, and busing is hard work. Like
it's
I worked
really
in a restaurant.
Yeah.
I was a waitress and like if I had to carry one of those bins even for a few feet, I couldn't do it. So I don't know how she's managing. Yeah.
Dorothy says that, what did she say? This must weigh 30 pounds.
This tub must weigh 30 pounds. It's funny. That's what the doctor said about you when you came out.
Yeah,
oh my God,
that was cute.
funny.
There's a lot of good Sophia lines.
They're actually, I did like a lot of the one-liners. It does get repetitive when you watch a few episodes in a row. Like the plots are pretty formulaic and predictable. The jokes are repetitive.
I could keep going.
But if it's on, like it works as far as this style of sitcom in a sense, that dialogue.
Out of everything we've watched, this is by far the easiest to watch. Like this was an easy.
It's true.
Oh yeah, it wasn't a chore.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah, this went down smooth.
Yeah, like it made me. It reminded me how much that I enjoy the Golden Girls because it's been so long since I've seen it.
Well, because the actors are great. Like as a collection of talent, they are all great. Don Cheadle is great. Like the performances are all very solid. Some of the dialogue is funny. And
yeah, most of it I found funny. Yeah, like, and you know what? The producers knew what they were doing. Like they hired good people. They casted well. Yeah, we were talking about before the cameo from Jack Black.
Young Jack Black.
I mean,
very young Jack Black. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that. You know, they knew what they were doing. I think they did the best they could with the concept that got greenlit.
Sam, since you're our guest, why don't we turn this over to you? Is there anything that you would like to officially add to our trope library?
Yes, the vanishing kid.
That
has to be in there, I feel. The disappearance of Oliver, was it? Yeah, like I'm trying to think what else besides Family Matters, whether it's somebody else.
Boy Meets World has Morgan Matthews go upstairs and not reappear for a couple of seasons.
Morgan, oh my gosh.
The actor.
And then it's a new actor.
It's a new actor, and then she even comments, Morgan, we haven't seen you in a while. And she goes, yeah, that was the longest,
bathroom break or something.
I've never been. That was like the longest time out I've ever had.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. In the 90s, they used people that weren't Caucasian as props mainly.
Yeah, they definitely used Cheech Marin as a prop, and it even comes out in the dialogue when Sophia first encounters him in the kitchen. And she's going in there thinking, okay, I'm going to take over this kitchen. We're going to do Italian food. And he's explaining that it's his kitchen and he's going to do Mexican food. And you can even hear it. This is in my notes.
There's a tension there.
There's a tension. And in the audience, when Sophia sort of shuts it down and makes some like disparaging remark about Mexican food, you can hear the audience cheer like crazy. And when,
oh my gosh.
And when Cheech Marin makes a retort back to that in defense of Mexican food, I actually heard some boos in the audience.
Oh no.
Like this audience was geared up to be on Sophia's side and to think of him as this.
But why is Italian food more American than Mexican food?
Yeah,
it's clearly not.
Good point. To their credit, Don Cheadle was not a stereotype. Well, I didn't find him a stereotype.
No, not at all.
And neither was Cheech when it comes down to it.
Well, ultimately, as the character is...
we don't get to talk about Cheech that much because, unfortunately, he's written very blandly for Cheech Marin.
So bland.
He's so underutilized in general.
I do, at least by episode 7 and 8, I do really like how he plays off them. And like
Yeah.
they actually have a very sweet relationship with him.
They
Whereas
do have a sweet relationship, but I wish they did more with him because he's
Yeah.
way funnier than he's coming out in this show.
Yeah. Him and Rose have a very sweet, like, he kind of
Yes.
takes care of her a little, and like, yeah, I like it a lot.
That is definitely some sort of trope, like this caricaturing or using people of other cultures as props in sitcoms.
Mhm.
That is definitely something they do with him, and thankfully they don't really do that with Don Cheadle, at least not in the episodes we saw, perhaps. But
and I really don't think, from what we've seen, I don't think they were in danger of going that route. It doesn't seem like they were.
Didn't Don Cheadle, I think Aaron, you were saying, didn't he recently reflect on Golden Palace? And he said
this is an interesting thing to talk about, actually.
Yeah.
So we'd be pretty remiss if we didn't get into the fact that the widely circulated viral video on social media right now of Don Cheadle arguing with Rue McClanahan about the Confederate flag is actually from this show, The Golden Palace.
Don Cheadle's character, as well as Blanche, are having this intense discussion about the Confederate flag, which she is defending, and he's trying to explain to her why the Confederate flag is so hateful and hurtful and terrible, and trying to convince her that it's not acceptable to put it up on display in the hotel lobby. And then I did a little further research, and it turns out that episode 11, which is called Camptown Races Aren't Nearly as Much Fun as They Used to Be. And the entire A story in the episode is about this issue of the Confederate flag, and it's prompted because there's a group that are coming to stay in the hotel called the Daughters of the Traditional South, which is probably a reference to the Daughters of the Confederacy, which is a notoriously terrible racist organization. And so
it's such a bizarre timing because I'm just looking it up. Yeah, and it all was everywhere. June 30th, 2020. I had no idea.
No,
that
me
it was
neither.
Isn't that crazy timing?
Yeah.
But yeah, it says Don Cheadle teaches the character of Blanche about racism in the Golden Girls spinoff, Golden Palace. Yeah, it's crazy. I do think this show, like the Golden Palace, it was pretty groundbreaking for its time. Because, I mean, like, I wouldn't think to put, especially back then, the Golden Girls with Don Cheadle and Cheech. Like,
yeah, you're right. Like, when they went to casting this show, they certainly did not go in any obvious directions.
Yeah, which is nice. Mm-hmm.
I agree with that totally. But I also think that they're trying to have important conversations in this show about little old white ladies, and they were trying to break new ground, but you know, because of the time, yes, there was the episode that we just talked about, which was for the time very well done. But I think, you know, that could be why we felt like the Cheech Marin character was like a little bit kind of one note and not quite as well fleshed out, is because they were trying to do something, but it didn't quite get there. Like, it didn't quite.
For sure. I mean, it's interesting to see that they were able to do these episodes in 93.
Yeah.
Whereas like they seem to have a lot harder times doing good episodes like this in, say, 2020.
Yeah, it's true.
What do you think is the number one reason or the reason why the show is canceled?
They needed to be retired. That's what I just think it was too odd and too problematic. And I think the show was really well done. They did the best they could do with it. And I don't know if you guys caught the little line too, when they were like explaining a couple of things that they explained. They kind of just did like a little one-liner when they were like, oh, Shady Pines, that burnt down years ago. And they're like, yeah, they rebuilt it. There's a few things like that I was like, okay, I'll turn a blind eye to that. But really, I just could not get into it because I feel like they needed to be retired. And yes, they tried fixing it with that, you know, really sweet scene that they have purpose again, which I fully understand. And I actually see on a personal level with my mom and my great grandmother. They like to be able to do things for us and our kids. But if you watch the original Golden Girls, those women were plenty busy. Like, they had a lot of stuff going on. And, you know, so it didn't justify the change for me. No.
It's a weird step backwards in their life.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I just feel bad for them. They're
Yeah.
like broke and money trouble, and they're in like a money pit hotel. Like that just gives me kind of anxiety watching.
Yeah, well, that's
Why not a bed and breakfast? Like
Something more leisure.
yeah,
Yeah,
like come on.
they first arrive at the hotel and they don't seem to know much about the place. They don't know who works there. They don't really.
How much staff members they have, which is the key thing.
There's the conversation at the beginning of the pilot with Don Cheadle's character where he's explaining that he's the manager, and this does not come across well, where Blanche finds it hard to believe that he's the person in charge. And I don't know what they were intending, but it certainly comes across pretty racist. But it just makes no sense that they wouldn't know who the manager is for a hotel that they've purchased. Like, I'm thinking there's no way in the world that you buy a business like that and you know so little about it. And then they do have a scene later where he's explaining the way that the previous owner cooked the books and covered things up and sold it quick and did all these things. And they sort of have a scene where it explains like, yeah, they were duped. But that doesn't make it better for us, the audience, as a premise for a show.
That just gave me more questions.
Yeah, I know. And when they walked in, it seemed to me like it was almost their first time walking into the lobby.
It definitely
they weren't, like,
was. And
right?
that, yeah.
So that's really odd. You would think you would do at least a little bit more than a drive-by.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure you cannot buy a fully operational hotel just through a banker on the phone.
Yeah.
I don't think
that's not a thing.
I don't think you can Uber Eats a whole hotel.
And this was before I think the internet was just coming out. So, but it was even like now where you could do virtual tours. And, so this was just, maybe they drove by once and let's buy that place. It says Golden in the name. So yeah, it's perfect.
That has to be it, right?
The name just syncs up.
Guys, it's like us.
Oh, so here's a potential trope. You have 7 and 8 where Dorothy makes her appearance. And when she walks in, they present her to the audience for a full standing ovation.
Oh, I love that.
I
always love that. That's a guest star
really
thing.
true.
Yeah, they really make a meal out of it.
That's not really a trope, though. That's just performance.
It's not a trope, but...
No, I think it's a trope. Like Full House, like I'm remembering now, like Family Matters, that totally happened. They'd walk in and they'd like pose in the door frame. And
it's just a side effect of shooting with 3 cameras in front of a live audience.
With a live audience.
They basically have to do it because the audience goes nuts.
Yeah.
When
So
the guest star shows
in
up.
a 3-cam sitcom, they'll present characters the way you would on a talk show when they're coming out and they get the standing ovation and then they sit down on the couch next to the host and have their conversation. Sitcoms did that. I'm not saying it's unnecessary.
Right.
Brynn, why don't we do 6 Degrees of Friends?
Sure, let's do this. So, if it's your first time listening to That Was a Show, the podcast, I do this little thing where I connect this short-lived sitcom to one of the most successful shows of that era, Friends, in 6 degrees or less. So, the Golden Palace is separated from Friends by 2 degrees of separation. The first being Betty White, who guest starred on Joey.
Yes. We're going to do Joey someday.
So Betty White guest starred on Joey, which was the failed spinoff of Friends.
Much like usual, I have to ask, did she hook up with Joey? I mean, I have to assume.
Yeah, no, I didn't look that far into it.
This is a good coincidence.
Yeah, no, I didn't look that far into it, but Betty White guest starred on Joey, and Joey, of course, was Joey Tribbiani on Friends. So that's 2 degrees. Estelle Getty was on a few episodes of Mad About You, and Mad About You had Lisa Kudrow as an ongoing character that was Ursula Buffet.
Ursula Buffet.
The twin sister of Phoebe Buffet on Friends. So that's 2 degrees. And then we have a 1 degree of separation that's not a cast member. Director Terry Hughes directed the pilot of The Golden Palace and obviously directed a ton of Friends.
Right on.
Yeah.
So how many things are we going to end up connecting through Ursula Phoebe? Because I feel
I mean, there's a lot of Phoebe Buffay is like the common denominator in a lot of sitcoms. It's wild.
Yeah, you've gotten a lot of mileage out of Phoebe Buffay.
She's also low-key
But it's Ursula Buffay, you know?
She's
it's
also
that mad about you.
low-key the second best friend.
Second best?
Joey.
You think Joey's the best friend?
Yeah, man. Rewatch it.
Okay, we'll take this one offline.
Anyway. For the spin-off, this one, of course, is very straightforward as well. The three main stars of the show were already legends. So Estelle Getty, Rue McClanahan, and Betty White were already TV legends. And after the disaster that was the Golden Palace, they continued to work steadily for years and years. And Betty White is still in the pop culture zeitgeist. She's still super popular, into her 90s.
She works a lot.
She works a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the three main girls, lots of the writers went on to do things. Mitchell Hurwitz, who was a writer on The Golden Palace, went on to create Arrested Development. Michael Davidoff went on to create other sitcoms that were short-lived and on our list for future episodes. But his biggest success was Nurse Jackie, starring Edie Falco, and ran for 7 seasons.
Oh, wow.
The biggest success story, the most obvious success story, is our friend Don Cheadle. You all know him as an A-list actor from Hotel Rwanda, Oceans 11, 12, and 13. He was in a couple of Iron Man movies, a couple of Avengers movies, starred in the Showtime series House of Lies, and now he's in Black Monday and is amazing in that show.
Black Monday's great.
I need to Google right now. How close is he to EGOTing? He has to be.
EGOTing, yeah, he might be.
He probably is a Tony away.
Oh, well, he's the only person who could say he's an Avenger and a Golden Girl, so that's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
I agree. And that's the thing about anybody who's familiar with the Marvel universe. If you got to replace somebody, you just get Don Cheadle.
Don Cheadle
he
will do a good job.
He was a replacement in the Marvel universe,
and of
as
course,
well. He
Jack
replaces
Black.
Terrence Howard.
Oh, that's true, but I don't know if I count Jack Black because he was only a guest star in like one.
True,
we do that, and then Cheech Marin,
of course, like
continues
to work
to this day. I enjoyed this so much more than everything else we've watched, mostly because I like the Golden Girls. So like I was fine with it. I also miss Dorothy, so it was nice when she came in. I feel like a version of this show that, like, off the top of my head that might have worked would be, I feel like the next natural step would have been all of them going into a retirement home together. And then if you want to keep them with some agency, how about they take over the retirement home and they sort of end up running it because it's, what they don't like who's running it and they've got money. So they're like, well, we're going to buy this place. That's the only other way I
think that's
a
much better idea.
Yeah.
Like even for Blanche, the endless suitors, like from staff or from other,
yes.
That would be really good.
Yeah. And like in episode 7 and 8, Sophia briefly checks into Shady Pines, and like there's some great jokes already in there about retirement living that I was like, this
totally.
They could have done this like that, like no problem.
Yeah.
Earlier, I alluded to a version of this show that might work, Sophia trying to do more than she really should and the other girls stopping her. But ultimately, I don't think there is a version of this show that really would work. But there is a spin-off of the Golden Girls that actually was successful. Do you guys remember Empty Nest?
No, what?
I remember the show. I didn't know that was in any way connected with the Golden Girls.
Yeah, it's very loose. Yeah, look it up. It's kind of weird. It ran from 88 to 95. And basically, the characters are positioned as neighbors of the Golden Girls.
Oh.
Yeah, and they actually sort of did a backdoor pilot before, and then that one didn't work, but then they tried it again and retooled it. Anyway, yeah, so Empty Nest is a spin-off of the Golden Girls that was successful, and the characters from the Golden Girls actually appear on Empty Nest.
I guess my concluding thought is that this sort of formulaic 3-camera sitcom, like even the most successful ones are, quite sentimental and they get repetitive, but they can be like this comfortable place that you sometimes feel like going. Like sometimes you're in the mood to just have one of these shows on in the background. And
Totally.
there were some shows in this style that were super successful. And this holds up reasonably well against those. I mean, a show like, I don't know, Everybody Loves Raymond. Like if you're just looking at a show with a couple generations of family hanging out, like this holds up just fine against shows like that. My metaphor is like going to a restaurant and ordering the spaghetti and meatballs. It's the most basic thing on the menu. There's other things that might be a bit of a risk. They might be more interesting, but sometimes you just feel like the comfort food. And shows like this are sort of comfort foody.
What kind of monster goes to a restaurant and orders spaghetti and meatballs?
we were at an Italian restaurant just last night, and it was on the menu. We didn't order it because we like to try new things.
To your point, Aaron, like they just, Fuller House. I watched that. My husband, I was like, don't tell anyone. I watched all of it. And also just, I think a day or two ago, they just greenlit or they could announce that the Who's the Boss reboot is coming. And I'm going to watch it.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to watch.
Yeah. I think
we'll all be curious.
I think I think Golden Palace is something that would very easily work to, like, obviously discounting the fact that only Betty White is still with us. This show works as like a nostalgia collector. Like this kind of show right now, if the original cast was alive, this show would be a hit on Netflix. Right? If they brought back this show instead of like literally 6 months after Golden Girls, like this show could have worked as a nostalgia show.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a trope, but this came up in a previous episode where, Barry, you were talking about how annoyed you get when someone's holding like a cup and they look like they're drinking, but there's clearly no liquid in it. And
I've spent a lot of time in my life just getting mad at the TV for that kind of
in
stuff.
In sitcoms back then, they would routinely have interactions with props that are not realistic. And if you're really paying attention, you would think like, come on, you could be drinking coffee, like just put something in the cup. And there's an ongoing thing in the Golden Girls where they gather together around a table and eat cheesecake and talk about their day or talk about their experiences. And it was like this heartwarming thing that they brought back in this show from the original. But this time around, at this age, having seen the single cam comedies that have been made after the last 20 years, it just nagged at me that they didn't eat the cheesecake. Just take a bite of the damn cheesecake. Put it in your mouth.
Cheesecake is delicious.
Put it in your mouth and swallow it. Eat the cheesecake. They had cheesecake sitting on the table, and they would just touch it with the fork.
Just
and
eat
I'm like,
the damn
just eat it.
Yeah.
There's a segment that we are going to add in this episode that perhaps we will do when we have guests that we're going to call the water cooler. So it's like back in the 90s and we're meeting at the office water cooler talking about something that we're actually watching and enjoying right now. Sam, as our guest, you can go ahead and do your show first.
We were talking about sitcoms, but I'm not watching many. To be quite honest, what I'm binge watching is RuPaul's Drag Race. And I just watched All Stars. That's been my COVID show. It's just really cheerful and I love it.
Great choice, Sam. It's definitely all of the RuPaul's Drag Race shows from the UK to
so good
All Stars, like
and Canada,
and the new Canadian one. Like they're super addictive, and they're just like it's just the perfect form of entertainment right now.
Yeah, it's super COVID-19. Happy. Like I love, especially during these times, I love seeing the transformations. And quite honestly, this is not, this is completely true. My daughter first started watching with me months ago, right? Like not watching, but she'd catch like a glimpse of it, and she'd say, like, I'd say it's a boy wearing a dress, and she'd be like, boys don't wear dresses, right? Which is so interesting because that wasn't coming, from our house, but obviously either it's stuff she's seen in Disney movies. I said, no, that's a boy. Sometimes they like to wear dresses. And then like months later, I put it back on again. And she goes, oh yeah, that's a boy. Sometimes I like to wear dresses. I said, yeah, that's right. I like watching it. And I really love that my daughter, we got to like, talk about that stuff. Yeah.
My contribution to the water cooler will be Nora from Queens. It's very new. There's only 10 episodes, but I just saw that it's been renewed for a second season. Brynn and I watched it all within a few days. And Awkwafina, she's very, very funny.
Oh, this show. Yeah.
The show presents a really unique take on, I guess what I would say, career and value system struggles for millennials, older millennials, like late 20s into early 30s. And BD Wong as Nora's dad does a kind of deadpan comedic delivery that I haven't quite seen before.
So good.
That is amazing. The way they play off each other is fantastic.
That's
And-
great. That's great casting.
Yeah,
I like that.
and Jennifer Esposito is back. She's
Oh,
acting
that's
again.
awesome.
Yeah, so Aaron took my choice for the water cooler, but because we watched it together. But you know
Oops.
what? I've been watching a ton of television, so I have other options. I've been rewatching The Good Place, which is always
Oh,
a
yes.
fun time.
Mhm.
Never gets old, and there's always like a new little Easter egg you discover every time you watch that show. And not a sitcom, but very funny and amazing is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oh, I love that show.
Oh, yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it.
That's-
It's such a treasure, and
Yeah, so good.
I love Rachel Brosnahan so much.
Yeah, yeah.
She's fantastic.
That too is like, again, very timely, although it's not set in this decade.
Yeah.
But about like, empowering women, and that I just loved it. And she's in the arts too. So like, I don't know about you, but I totally related to her.
Oh,
just
totally.
trying-
Totally. The tough
Mhm.
choices that you have to make as a woman
Mhm.
pursuing a career
Mhm.
in, something that's not so straightforward.
Yeah. And to have a little bit of a potty mouth, I could totally relate to as well with my writing.
Yeah.
No, I got notes back from something I wrote, and the person who read it wrote back, I really like this. I was very surprised to see that it was raunchy AF. And I was like, it is, yeah.
So I'm basically, as far as sitcoms go right now, I'm doing some comfort rewatches of both Bob's Burgers and 30 Rock. I'm also watching the 2015 ABC sitcom The Muppets.
Yeah.
And I don't care what anybody
That's an unusual choice.
I don't care what anybody says. It is absolutely goddamn delightful, and it is one of my favorite Muppets things ever. And then as far as new things going, I'm watching Euphoria, which I'm really, really liking,
Mhm.
and it's certainly hitting me pretty hard on some of the mental health issues covered in it. So
Euphoria's great.
yeah, it's just a wonderful show, and everybody in it is so fucking good.
Yep.
Yep, that's about it for me. No matter how many times I try to go over this, like, how do you pitch this? Because it's pretty obvious that the show was just the Golden Girls without Bea Arthur. So it's like, how does my angry producer pitch this?
Let's take a crack at it and see what comes out.
All right, cool.
Barry, I'm a network executive in the late 80s or perhaps early 90s, and you're a coked out producer. Pitch me the Golden Palace.
Hey, Aaron,
Yeah.
you know that show, The Golden Girls?
Yeah, love it.
You know how we just ended it?
Uh-huh.
Well, let's just keep it going. Get me Rue McClanahan,
Okay.
get me Estelle Getty,
Yep.
get me Betty White,
Mm-hmm.
and get me Bea Arthur.
Can't get her.
What? Why can't we get her?
Can't get her.
Okay, get me Don Cheadle. He's the next best thing to Bea Arthur. Let's do it. Maybe we'll set it in a restaurant or a cafe or a bed and breakfast or a hotel.
That's
or
the one.
a hotel? Sure, why not a hotel? All right.
Do you have a hotel set?
Maybe we'll just repaint the living room from Golden Girls and make it a hotel kitchen. It all makes the same amount of sense.
Sold.
All right.
I will turn it over to you, Sam, if you have any final thoughts on the show, summing things up.
The only thing that I didn't say that I thought a lot when we were talking, especially about Blanche, is I wonder how much Sex in the City was like inspired by this show. Because I saw with the female friendship and then having the one like sex bomb character.
Mhm.
That was the only random thought I had.
That's a really-
Yeah,
That's a really interesting point.
She is basically
She's-
Samantha.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like the first Samantha, and then Charlotte, who I think, the Charlotte from Sex and the City was kind of the naive one.
Yeah?
And then Miranda was kind of, I guess she would be Sophia.
I guess she, yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then Sarah Jessica Parker would be Dorothy. Other than that, like, it's not a horrible watch. If you love Golden Girls, I would still check this out.
Sam, is there anything that you want to plug or tell us about that you're working on right now?
Just pitching and writing, and yeah, Prom Night, the feature I have written, and I'm just working with a seasoned writer producer doing the polished draft, so that's very exciting. And then I have a new dramatic, it's kind of a romance thriller, I guess is what I would call it. It's like Bram Stoker's Dracula, so I don't really know what that would be defined as. It's like there's some horror in there, but it's also romance.
Gothic romance. That's
Well,
that's how
see,
I
it's not
always.
supernatural, but that's actually really good. I'm going to write that down. But yeah, so basically, I'm working on a pilot that's kind of crazy. It's based on a real life serial killer from the 1800s. And
H.H. Holmes?
Yes.
Yes.
And my take on it is, I started working on it years ago, and then I heard Leonardo DiCaprio was doing one, and I scrapped it. But you know what? They still haven't done it, so I'm still going with it.
Have you read that though? Murder in the White City?
Yes, The Devil in the White City.
Devil in the White City.
And mine's nothing like that at all. And my take is like, and Brynn, maybe you'll understand where I'm coming from with this. But my thing was, I couldn't believe this existed, that there actually was a serial killer in the 1800s who bought a hotel. Speaking of buying hotels, but he needed a little different what he did with
there's
his.
a version of this.
Yeah. He was severely understaffed as well, but that was on purpose because he was murdering everyone. And this is a true thing. And he had trapdoors and, and torture chamber in the basement. And so this is real. So that blew my mind. And then I thought, well, gosh, could you imagine being a guest in that hotel? And then I thought, could you imagine being a woman in his hotel? That's even worse. And I thought, well, can you imagine being a person of color in that hotel? And when I dig, there was some research that some of the staff who was, people of color found out what he was doing and no one believed him. So that's basically the concept of the pilot that I'm writing called The Murder Castle. And a couple of things happened with it so far. It's been Netflix Banff diversity program. It was selected for that. And I'm just developing it right now. But I'm really excited about that. And we'll see what happens with that.
That's awesome.
Super exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Sam, for...
Thank you for having me. I hope that was okay.
Oh, yeah.
This was great.
A great first guest.
So happy. I feel honored. Thank you guys. And I want to say officially thank you, Aaron, for all your hard work on prom night.
Oh, thank you.
I always talk of you fondly. No, because, prom night was my baby. And you and Mo were just fantastic. And you guys were dealing with me as a new mother, severely sleep deprived. So I don't imagine I was always very pleasant, but I hope that I was. But no, I thank you guys so much. And especially too, we did that before the watershed moment of Me Too movement and all that stuff. And, people with that all coming out, I had discussions about making my first film. And, I was like, I never experienced any of that because my producers were awesome and they did not treat me any differently. They were always very, treated me as equals. And I was really fortunate that like for my first, pressure cooker directing job, I had great fellow coworkers that happened to be male. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You were great to collaborate with. You did a fabulous job on it. It seemed to turn out in the way that you set to achieve. And
it did. Yeah. Thankfully.
and but it was a pleasure collaborating with you on that and a great opportunity. And thanks again for joining us for this show. This was a really fun conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
This was fun. We had a lot of laughs, but some things are no laughing matter. What did we all learn from the Golden Palace?
I learned that in the likely event that I'll still be working in my 80s, that I can run an entire hotel with just a couple of pals.
And cut to credits. That Was a Show is a production of Radio Gizmo. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on Instagram for info about upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends about it.
Next time on That Was a Show.
Hey, have you guys seen After MASH?
What was After MASH?
After MASH.
But what was on After MASH?
No, I'm asking if you've seen the TV show After MASH.
What was the TV show that was on After MASH?
After MASH?
That's what I'm asking you.
Guys, seriously? You two have no business doing a Who's on First routine. We're watching the show After MASH. It was a spinoff of MASH. Radio Gizmo.